The night of June 5th, 1944, fell quietly over Normandy. German defenders stationed near the Bénouville Canal believed the early hours would pass without incident. Soldiers dozed lightly, sentries rotated, and the soft hum of distant artillery on the horizon was only a reminder of the wider preparations for the expected Allied invasion. Yet the calm was fragile, a thin veneer over tension and anticipation. Across the English Channel, Operation Neptune was in motion, and the quiet of Normandy would soon shatter. At Pegasus Bridge, German troops garrisoned a modest position, confident in the natural defenses of the canal and surrounding terrain. Officers moved through the camp, checking weapons, confirming patrols, and reviewing defensive plans. Reports had arrived of unusual aircraft activity over the coast, but reconnaissance was sparse, and complacency lingered. The defenders were seasoned, yet unaware that their position was about to become the focal point of one of the first airborne assaults on D-Day. In the dark hours before dawn, British gliders approached silently. The paratroopers of the 6th Airborne Division were minutes from landing, yet German defenders remained largely unaware of the imminent assault. Some heard the faint hum of engines, others mistook it for routine activity. A sentry shifted uneasily, but the majority of the garrison continued their preparations for a quiet morning. Suddenly, the British gliders landed with remarkable precision, mere meters from the bridge. German defenders reacted with confusion. Shouts echoed in the cold air, rifles and machine guns were manned hastily, and soldiers scrambled to assess the situation. The shock of the landing, executed with near-perfect stealth, left many disoriented. Confusion reigned as officers attempted to marshal their troops against an unexpected and highly skilled force. Private diaries later revealed the thoughts of soldiers in those moments: disbelief, panic, and the stark realization that the bridge was under immediate threat. One soldier wrote of the chaos: "They came from nowhere, silent and fast." One moment the bridge was ours, the next it was in the hands of shadows. We fired, we shouted, we ran, yet they were already across. The German defenders had been prepared for an attack, but not for the speed, precision, and audacity of glider-borne troops. Officers barked orders, but in the darkness, with landing craft dispersed and paratroopers already on the far side of the bridge, command was difficult. The disciplined lines of defense dissolved into fragmented resistance, soldiers reacting individually rather than collectively. As the British troops secured the bridge, the German defenders' confusion deepened. Reports later captured their disbelief. How could they arrive so silently, so quickly? We did not hear their approach until it was too late. The bridge, our defensive position, was already compromised before we could react. Small units attempted counterattacks, but the British paratroopers were entrenched, using every available piece of cover. The defenders fired from behind walls, from the canal embankments, and from nearby houses. Yet the speed and coordination of the airborne assault left them outmatched. Officers, trying to restore order, found that the initiative had shifted entirely. In private, some German soldiers admitted the extent of their shock and frustration. One corporal later reflected: "We had trained for defense, for an invasion from the sea, but not for this. They moved faster than we could think, striking where we were weakest. The bridge was meant to hold, but we were already behind." Meanwhile, officers attempted to organize reinforcements. Messages were sent to nearby positions, calling for support, but the British paratroopers held the critical points. Every attempt to rally troops was hampered by uncertainty and the disorienting pace of the attack. German communication lines were fragmented, radio signals were intercepted, misheard, or delayed. The defenders faced a crisis not only of firepower, but of coordination. The battle for Pegasus Bridge lasted mere minutes, yet for the German defenders, it was an eternity. Panic, disbelief, and frantic reactions dominated their perspective. Some attempted to retreat, others engaged in desperate hand-to-hand combat, and many were captured almost immediately. Officers shouted orders that could not be executed in time, their authority challenged by the sudden and overwhelming effectiveness of the British assault. German diaries and post-war interviews revealed the mixture of emotions in those moments: frustration at unpreparedness, admiration for the enemy's skill, and the bitter sting of being outmaneuvered. One soldier admitted, "They were ghosts, moving with precision we could not match. We fought, yes, but it was like hitting shadows. The bridge was theirs before we knew the fight had begun." The shock was compounded by the realization that the capture of Pegasus Bridge threatened broader strategic objectives. The defenders understood that control of the bridge meant the British could secure vital routes for reinforcement, complicating German defensive plans in Normandy. Even in retreat, soldiers recognized the significance of what they had lost in mere moments. Hitler's doctrine emphasized disciplined, prepared defense, yet at Pegasus Bridge, the German defenders faced a lesson in the unpredictability of war. The speed, audacity, and coordination of airborne operations exposed vulnerabilities, and the shock, confusion, and rapid defeat left many questioning not only the circumstances of the attack, but their own readiness. As the first light of dawn illuminated the scene, German defenders regrouped where possible, taking stock of casualties and prisoners. Officers issued terse reports: positions compromised, prisoners taken, bridge lost, immediate response required. The mix of disbelief and urgency dominated communication. The British had achieved a decisive, if small-scale, victory that reverberated across the defensive network. The initial German response was tactical, attempting to delay further British consolidation and regain control of the approaches. Yet the psychological impact of the glider-borne assault was profound. Soldiers admitted in post-war accounts that the suddenness and effectiveness of the operation had shattered confidence and left them questioning the viability of their defensive strategies. In private conversations among officers, the sentiment was unanimous. The British had struck with audacity and precision, exploiting weaknesses in German positioning and preparation. The speed of the capture of Pegasus Bridge was as remarkable as it was infuriating. Disbelief, frustration, and reluctant admiration intertwined, creating a complex mixture of emotions rarely acknowledged in official reports. By mid-morning, German commanders were issuing revised orders. Reinforcements were to move toward the bridge, defensive positions reorganized, and counterattacks planned. Yet every measure was reactive, forced by the rapid success of the British paratroopers. The defenders had been outmaneuvered, and the consequences would be felt across the sector. By early morning, German defenders near Pegasus Bridge were fully aware that the British paratroopers had seized control. The initial shock had given way to a mixture of disbelief, frustration, and rising panic. Officers moved among their troops, attempting to restore order, but the speed and audacity of the assault had fractured the chain of command. Soldiers reacted independently, firing from cover, retreating in small groups, or attempting desperate counterattacks, often without coordination. Reports sent to higher command described the situation in stark terms. The bridge was lost, paratroopers were entrenched, and German positions around Bénouville were compromised. Communication lines were strained, and messages between units were delayed or misinterpreted. In letters and diaries, defenders recounted the confusion. "We were trained, yes, but not for this. They came like shadows, silent and sudden. Our defenses meant nothing." One officer, later interviewed after the war, remembered the scene vividly. The bridge was supposed to hold, the canal was supposed to be an obstacle. And yet, within minutes, it was in enemy hands. We were scrambling, firing blindly, shouting orders that could not be obeyed in time. It was surreal. Attempts at a coordinated counterattack were hampered by terrain, poor visibility, and the overwhelming precision of the British assault. Soldiers who tried to advance found themselves pinned by covering fire, unable to maneuver effectively. The paratroopers had established strong defensive positions on both ends of the bridge, using walls, nearby buildings, and natural cover to their advantage. Every German attempt to regain control was repelled, deepening frustration and disbelief. Private accounts reveal the psychological impact. Fear, humiliation, and shock combined with reluctant respect for the enemy's skill. One soldier wrote, "They moved faster than we could think. Every time we tried to push them back, they seemed already ahead of us. It was infuriating and bewildering." Commanders sent urgent messages requesting reinforcements from nearby units. Panicked reports described the situation in precise detail. Positions overrun, officers wounded, soldiers scattered, and critical strategic points compromised. Yet German units responding to the call were delayed by confusion, miscommunication, and the rapid consolidation of British positions. The gap between intent and execution exposed a vulnerability the paratroopers had exploited brilliantly. As the morning progressed, German defenders attempted to regroup. Officers organized small defensive pockets, attempting to slow further British advances along the approaches to the bridge. Mortar teams fired sporadically from concealed positions, and snipers attempted to target key positions, but the efficiency and discipline of the British troops continued to frustrate all efforts. A corporal later recalled the scene. "We were tired, disoriented, and outnumbered in tactical skill at that moment. Every movement we made was anticipated. It felt as though the enemy knew the terrain better than we did." Confusion extended to logistical support. Ammunition deliveries were delayed, vehicles became trapped in narrow roads, and the chaos of the night assault had left key defensive positions abandoned or poorly manned. German soldiers struggled to maintain cohesion, and officers frequently found themselves issuing orders that could not be enforced. The collapse of structure at Pegasus Bridge was as much psychological as it was tactical. German soldiers also expressed disbelief at the audacity of the British operation. The use of silent gliders, precise landing, and immediate assault on a critical objective defied all expectations. Many admitted privately that they had underestimated the likelihood of an airborne assault and had been caught entirely off guard. The first captured soldiers were interrogated almost immediately. Their reactions varied from fear to defiance. German defenders noted the discipline and resolve of the paratroopers, who held key positions despite being heavily outnumbered in the immediate area. This, in turn, frustrated and demoralized the defenders, many of whom were forced to retreat under the pressure of superior tactics. By mid-morning, reinforcements from nearby German positions began arriving, but the British had already consolidated control. The defenders' response, though coordinated in theory, could not overcome the combination of surprise, speed, and tactical advantage wielded by the paratroopers. Officers recorded their amazement. "They struck with precision we had not seen. It was as if the bridge had been destined to fall." Private accounts reveal the emotional toll on the defenders. Many admitted to fear for their lives, frustration at being outmaneuvered, and shock at the rapidity of the loss. The psychological impact was compounded by the realization that the bridge was a critical strategic objective, and its capture had far-reaching consequences beyond the immediate battlefield. As afternoon approached, German officers sought to stabilize their remaining positions. Patrols were dispatched to observe British movements, communication lines were re-established, and defensive pockets were reinforced. Yet the bridge remained under firm British control, and any attempt to retake it would be costly and uncertain. The defenders' initial shock had evolved into a tense urgency, a mixture of fear, disbelief, and grudging respect for the enemy. Even soldiers not directly engaged in the fight expressed astonishment. Reports mention men in nearby units pausing to observe the effectiveness of the airborne assault, muttering disbelief at the speed, audacity, and skill displayed by the British paratroopers. One officer reflected later, "They executed with a calm we could not match. Our forces were disorganized. Theirs were precise. That bridge was theirs from the moment they landed." By evening, German commanders in the sector submitted detailed reports on the action. The bridge was lost, casualties mounted, and the need for further reinforcements was emphasized. The language of the reports conveyed disbelief and shock, but also a clear acknowledgement of the tactical ingenuity demonstrated by the British assault. By mid-morning, the German defenders at Pegasus Bridge faced the full weight of the British assault. Initial confusion had given way to desperate attempts at counteraction, yet the bridge remained firmly in Allied hands. German officers moved among the troops, issuing orders to regroup, reinforce flanks, and establish defensive positions along the approaches. Every action, however, was hampered by the earlier chaos and the rapid consolidation of British forces. Private diaries reveal the mix of shock, disbelief, and fear. They came with such precision. By the time we realized what was happening, the bridge was theirs. Every command we issued felt useless. Despite their training, German soldiers struggled to respond effectively. The terrain around Pegasus Bridge, narrow roads, canal embankments, and nearby buildings favored the defenders who now held the position. Attempts to advance through these areas met with well-coordinated fire from British paratroopers, forcing German troops into cover or retreat. Officers barked commands, but fragmented communication meant soldiers often acted independently, diminishing the potential effectiveness of any coordinated counterattack. Reinforcements from nearby positions began to arrive, but the British had already fortified their hold. German soldiers, many exhausted and disoriented from the night's sudden assault, were forced into defensive pockets rather than offensive maneuvers. Frustration and disbelief were widespread. One officer later recounted, "They struck silently, swiftly, and with resolve we could not match. By the time our reinforcements arrived, the bridge was already in their control. We were too late, too scattered." The psychological impact on the defenders was profound. Many soldiers admitted to feelings of fear and humiliation. The rapid seizure of a critical strategic position had not only tactical but symbolic significance. German defenders knew that Pegasus Bridge was essential for controlling approaches to Caen and other key positions in Normandy, and its loss threatened broader strategic objectives. Private accounts capture the internal conflict of the defenders, frustration at being outmaneuvered, disbelief at the speed of the assault, and reluctant admiration for the enemy's skill. One soldier wrote, "They moved like shadows, calm, precise. Each action seemed premeditated, as if they had studied the bridge for months. We were simply reacting to them." As the afternoon progressed, German officers attempted to coordinate small counterattacks. Soldiers moved cautiously along roads and embankments, using cover where possible, while snipers targeted British positions from nearby buildings. Yet every attempt to dislodge the paratroopers was repelled. The defenders' lack of cohesion, combined with the disciplined execution of the British assault, made success improbable. Communication among German units remained inconsistent. Reports of the bridge's capture reached divisional command, prompting requests for additional reinforcements. Messages were delayed or misinterpreted, further complicating response efforts. The defenders' frustration was compounded by their awareness that the situation had strategic consequences beyond the immediate battlefield. Soldiers' private reflections reveal a mix of disbelief and strategic realization. The bridge, simple in appearance, was crucial. We lost it in minutes, and now the enemy controlled our lines of approach. Our position was compromised, and we knew it. By late afternoon, German commanders recognized the futility of immediate recapture attempts. The British had consolidated, set up defensive positions, and were preparing to repel further assaults. Officers ordered a tactical withdrawal to regroup and defend nearby positions, marking the loss of Pegasus Bridge as both a tactical and psychological setback. Post-war interviews with German defenders emphasized the shock of being outmaneuvered by a relatively small, lightly armed force. The paratroopers' speed, discipline, and surprise had exposed weaknesses in German planning and preparedness. One corporal reflected, "They were few but decisive. Every move we made seemed anticipated. It was frustrating, infuriating, and almost unbelievable. Even as the defenders withdrew to secondary positions, the implications of the loss were clear. Pegasus Bridge served as a critical point for the Allied advance, enabling further movements into Normandy and the establishment of a foothold for the larger invasion. German officers recognized that the failure to hold the bridge would have cascading consequences, influencing defensive strategies across the sector. By evening, the German response had shifted from reactive counterattacks to defensive consolidation. Troops fortified nearby buildings, dug shallow trenches, and positioned machine guns to cover approaches. The focus was no longer on reclaiming the bridge immediately, but on preventing further British expansion and securing alternative positions. Private reflections continued to reveal disbelief at the effectiveness of the airborne assault. They landed silently, struck decisively, and held what we thought was impregnable. We had trained for defensive operations, but nothing prepared us for this speed and coordination. As night fell, German officers compiled reports detailing positions, casualties, and the status of remaining forces. The language captured a mixture of shock, frustration, and acknowledgement of the skill demonstrated by the British paratroopers. Many noted that the assault on Pegasus Bridge represented a turning point in the early hours of the Normandy invasion, a small engagement with strategic significance far beyond its scale. By the end of the day, the German defenders were exhausted, demoralized, and acutely aware of the tactical genius exhibited by the British paratroopers. The capture of Pegasus Bridge had not only disrupted German defensive planning, but had also highlighted vulnerabilities in their preparedness for airborne operations. Shock, disbelief, and reluctant admiration shaped their perspective, leaving an indelible mark on all who witnessed the event. As night descended over Normandy, German defenders at Pegasus Bridge grappled with the aftermath of the British airborne assault. The initial shock and disbelief had evolved into tense calculation. Officers moved among exhausted troops, issuing orders to consolidate positions, protect flanks, and prepare for potential Allied advances from the bridgehead. Morale was low, but the awareness of the strategic significance of the bridge heightened urgency. Reports from secondary positions confirmed the extent of the British success. Paratroopers held both ends of the bridge, controlled approaches, and were actively repelling any German attempt to retake the crossing. Communications with higher command indicated that reinforcements could not arrive quickly enough to change the outcome. The defenders were forced into reactive measures, relying on scattered defensive pockets and improvised fortifications. Private accounts capture the mixture of frustration and admiration. They moved with precision and purpose. By the time we understood what was happening, the bridge was theirs. Every step we took was anticipated. German officers convened to assess the situation. Maps were spread across tables, showing the positions of both German and British forces. Each movement of the paratroopers was noted, and plans were drafted to secure nearby roads and buildings to prevent further consolidation. Yet even in strategic assessment, disbelief lingered. A relatively small, lightly armed force had achieved a decisive objective with minimal casualties on their side. Efforts to mount counterattacks were limited. Soldiers moved cautiously along narrow roads and through fields, seeking to engage paratroopers who were already well positioned. Attempts were often repelled with suppressing fire, forcing retreats and leaving units fragmented. Officers noted the psychological toll. Soldiers were fatigued, demoralized, and struggling to reconcile the loss of a critical defensive position with the expectation of German military competence. Interviews conducted after the war reveal the personal experience of German defenders. We trained for defense, for invasions across beaches, for artillery and armored engagements. But this was something else. They struck silently, decisively, and held what should have been ours. The strategic importance of Pegasus Bridge was not lost on any level of command. Its capture allowed the Allies to secure a route for reinforcements into the Normandy interior, complicating German plans and threatening to undermine defensive cohesion across the sector. Even as the defenders prepared for further engagements, the knowledge that the bridge was firmly in British hands created a shadow over all subsequent operations. By mid-morning, German reinforcements attempted to establish observation posts and control key approaches to the bridge. Machine guns were positioned along canal embankments, and snipers occupied buildings overlooking the area. These measures slowed further British advances, but did not challenge their hold on the bridge itself. Every movement was reactive, dictated by the success of the initial assault rather than strategic initiative. Private reflections among soldiers highlight the mix of disbelief, frustration, and grudging respect. They moved like ghosts, precise and unyielding. Every attempt we made to challenge them was met with skill and coordination we could not match. The bridge was theirs, and it felt like nothing we did could change that. As afternoon approached, the German command accepted that Pegasus Bridge would remain under Allied control for the immediate future. Officers focused on preventing expansion, reinforcing nearby positions, and preparing contingencies in case of further British advances. The rapid capture had shifted the balance, leaving defenders in a defensive posture that emphasized containment rather than recapture. Reports indicated that British forces were reinforcing their positions, digging in along canal banks, and securing surrounding structures. German soldiers admitted privately that the skill and discipline displayed were beyond what they had expected from a lightly armed airborne unit. Shock and disbelief persisted, tempered by the realization that the British had exploited weaknesses in German positioning, command, and preparedness. By evening, defensive positions were stabilized as much as possible. German officers compiled reports, detailed troop dispositions, casualties, and areas of concern. Diaries and post-war interviews reveal the mental toll. Frustration, humiliation, and admiration combined in a complex emotional response to a rapid and decisive defeat. One soldier recalled, "We were trained, prepared, yet completely outmatched in coordination and speed. It was like fighting against shadows that knew every move before we did." That bridge was theirs from the start. Nightfall brought a temporary lull in active engagement, but tension remained high. German defenders fortified positions, established patrols, and kept vigilant watch over the approaches. Pegasus Bridge, though small in scale, had become a symbol of the Allies' precision and effectiveness, demonstrating the power of airborne operations in World War II. The loss of the bridge underscored broader lessons for German command. Dispersed units, lack of preparedness for airborne assault, and communication breakdowns had all contributed to rapid defeat. Officers recognized the need for immediate adaptation, improved coordination, and heightened vigilance in anticipation of further Allied operations. Private accounts emphasized the mixture of awe and frustration. They struck with perfect timing, moving silently, decisively, and holding what should have been impossible to take. It was infuriating, and yet we could not help but respect the skill involved. By the end of the first day of D-Day, Pegasus Bridge remained in British hands. German defenders had regrouped and stabilized surrounding positions, but the bridge itself symbolized a tactical success that had immediate and long-term consequences. Shock, disbelief, and reluctant admiration were etched into the memories of those who had faced the sudden, audacious assault. The first hours of the capture demonstrated that even a small, highly trained force could achieve strategic objectives with speed, precision, and coordination. German soldiers, seasoned in defensive warfare, were forced to confront an unexpected reality. Rigid preparation alone could not counter innovation and audacity. As the night settled, officers and soldiers alike understood the gravity of what had occurred. Pegasus Bridge, captured in minutes by airborne troops, had altered the landscape of the Normandy invasion. The defenders, though resilient, had been tested and found wanting. their surprise and shock illustrating the power of initiative and execution in World War II.